Labdien, sāksim preses konferenci.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the press conference following the meeting between the presidents of the Republic of Latvia and Moldova on 1st of April in the Riga Castle. We'll start with the statements by both presidents and then we'll open the floor for questions. Good afternoon, dear members of media. Today I have the pleasure and delight to welcome on an official visit to the Riga Castle the President of the Republic of Moldova Maia Sandu. We in fact, have often met, have been in close contact in different formats recently. We recently also met at the Munich Security Conference back in 2024, together with the other Baltic presidents. I had the honor and pleasure of visiting Moldova to support Moldova's path towards the European Union. And I should say that somehow it has probably gone unnoticed, but the last official visit of the Moldovan president to Latvia was 11 years ago, in 2015. That doesn't mean that our relations have in any way weakened. On the contrary, they have grown stronger. What I would like to underline today is that Latvia and Moldova are close friends and partners. I would like to specifically underline that we are bound by a lot of shared priorities, but the most important dimension that I would like to highlight is that in my meetings with the head of the Moldovan state, as well as during our official negotiations between various government officials, we have always communicated very clearly that we have always supported swift accession of Moldova to the European Union. We know how much Moldova has done to reform itself and to accede to the European Union. We believe that negotiations should be opened immediately between the EU negotiators and Moldova. We have always stood firmly behind such a position. We know that, of course, the decision has to be taken unanimously by 27 EU member states, but political and practical support has been, is and will be also provided in future, and we will be unwavering in our support, and this is what I reaffirm to my Moldovan colleague today. Of course, there are still a lot of things that need to be done and reformed, but we do believe firmly that Moldova must be a part of the European Union as soon as possible, and we must work toward it as much as possible. We not only provide political support, we also provide very practical support. Latvia supports Moldova in many areas, helping it transpose the EU laws and requirements and standards. Our Ministry of Agriculture supports the Ministry of Agriculture of Moldova in transposition of the EU legal acts. Our Ministry of Justice supports Moldova when it comes to intellectual property rights and strengthening of this system. Our border guards have helped Moldova strengthen its borders, also providing the necessary technologies for the surveillance and monitoring of the border. And in my notes, I have a special fact included here. Although it's the 1st of April, this is no April Fool's joke. We have our border guard have also given the special canine to the Moldovan border guard. So indeed, this only reaffirms that we have broad and comprehensive support. We also have cooperation in the education sector. Riga Graduate School of Law, for example, is cooperating. But, you know, the list is endless when it comes to support between our countries. And I could go on for hours. But one thing is what we are doing for Moldova, but there's also a lot that we can learn from Moldova. And Madam President and I, we discussed also the elections. As you very well know, in 2025, Moldova managed to conduct very efficiently elections despite the Russian hybrid attacks, various hybrid attacks, starting from cyber attacks up to, in fact, you know, information warfare and even more. And this is something that we can learn a lot since we have elections ahead of us. And Madam President shared some of the tips, or some of the ways to ensure fair elections, but we'll continue cooperating on this matter. This is very important for us, knowing what is happening at the moment in Latvia. Like Moldova, we as well need to make sure that the elections are perfectly legitimate and nobody would have any doubts about the legitimacy or fairness of the elections. And of course, we are encountering interesting challenges along the way, as we discussed with Madam President. I would like to also underline that our support to Ukraine and Moldova, since it's bordering with Ukraine, Moldova knows very well or feels quite vividly the Russian aggression against Ukraine, especially the attacks against the energy infrastructure and also some of the drones or shells, parts of the rockets that fall in Moldova is something that they have also experienced. We are ready to stand with Ukraine and provide support to Ukraine. And we also discussed in a broader sense also the security situation in our region. So indeed, this was an excellent opportunity for us with my Moldovan colleague to not only take a stock of what we've already achieved, but also outline the priorities for our future cooperation. This is where I'd like to put a full stop and give the floor to Madam Sandu for her opening statement. Then we'll be ready to answer your questions that I hope will follow. So it's over to you, Madam President.
Dear President Rinkēvičs, thank you for the invitation to come to Riga. Latvia is a country Moldova feels close to, not just as a partner, but as a country that walked a path we are walking now. You know what it takes, and you have been generous in helping us get there. Our bilateral relationship is solid, and we feel your support. Moldovan professionals study European law here in Riga. Latvian companies are helping to design our digital infrastructure. You are supporting the modernization of our armed forces. There is a direct flight between our countries. On our way to the European Union, Moldova, inspired by the Latvians' path, is working hard. We're doing our homework, strengthening our institutions, reforming our judiciary, fighting corruption, aligning our laws with European standards. The Commission calls us the best performing candidate. We're doing this under conditions that are harder than what Latvia faced over 2 decades ago. A war on our border, a sustained campaign to destabilize our democracy, and yet our people have voted 3 times in 2 years under enormous pressure, and 3 times they have chosen Europe. And I want to make the case plainly. Europe will be stronger and more secure with Moldova in sight. A stable European Moldova cannot be destabilized, cannot be used as a pressure point against the wider continent. We share 1,200 kilometers of border with Ukraine. A Moldova anchored in the EU strengthens Ukraine's entire western flank and with it the security of the region. Enlargement is an important security investment Europe can make right now. I count on Latvia's voice in Brussels, in the European Council, in every room where that decision is being shaped to make that case. And Moldova has something to offer too. We're not just asking to be protected, we're also contributing. We have spent the last several years on the front line of hybrid warfare, and we're sharing those hard lessons with anyone who faces the same. We send firefighters when our fellow Europeans need them. We contribute peacekeepers to international missions. A Moldova inside the EU does not add to the burden, it adds to the capacity. On Ukraine, supporting Ukraine for us is a matter of our own survival. Ukraine stands between Moldova and the aggressor, and we owe it an enormous debt. Latvia's support has been extraordinary, among the most generous in the world relative to the size of your economy, and unwavering from the first day. We feel the same obligation. We are sheltering Ukrainians, providing humanitarian aid, training their deminers, and adding our voice in support of Ukraine in every forum. We want to be part of and contribute to the coalition of the willing that helps secure Ukraine when the war ends. The Edgars, a country that has known what it means to lose its freedom and win it back, understands this moment better than most. That is why Latvia's voice carries weight, and that is why Moldova counts on it. Paldies. Thank you.
And now we're opening the floor for questions. We'll start with TV3. Gatis Sukovitskis from TV3 News. A question to Madam President about Moldova's path towards the European Union. How would you evaluate the progress of the accession talks or negotiations, since, as far as I understand, no new chapters have been opened due to the objections from the Hungary? Are you not concerned that due to Hungarian veto, these negotiations or the accession progress might be halted? Thank you.
Well, the accession process is a merit-based process. In the recent report by the European Commission, we saw that Moldova has made good progress, and this progress has been acknowledged by the EU. We have been able to technically work on all the clusters, and we've been making progress. But of course, we would like to see a formal decision by the EU institutions and by the EU member states to formally proceed, because again, if we all agree that this is a merit-based process, then a solution should be found, and we should be able to move to the next steps.
Paldies. Leta.
Thank you, Leta News Agency. I would like to ask both heads of the state. President Rinkēvičs already mentioned parliamentary elections in Moldova in 2025 and the information war and the wave of disinformation. Yesterday, Latvia submitted a complaint to Russia about the disinformation campaign it is waging against Latvia. What do you believe that countries can learn from each other fighting misinformation, and what is missing in Europe in this regard? Thank you. I should probably start and then I'll let my colleague continue. In fact, you're absolutely right. During our meeting, we briefly touched or briefly talked about this question, not only from the perspective of what we can learn from each other, but rather, instead of harshly criticizing Europe for its gaps or hesitancy, but rather we both agreed that Europe needs a shift of paradigms. And it is obvious that each elections are different, are not the same, because Russia learns from each elections. You might remember what happened in Romania, where social media as TikTok and account boosting played, and unfortunately their constitutional court needed to intervene. One thing is using social media to spread misinformation, deep fakes, to implement different campaigns, and Latvia has done some serious homework to prevent that. Our criminal law provides penalties for the use of deep fakes, for spreading deep fakes, and we have actually worked quite hard on adopting protocols on how to prevent the misinformation during the elections. So social media campaigns is one thing that we are also trying to counter illegal financing of the elections using, for example, cryptocurrencies, which is what we also discussed with Madam President. And also with regard to this third factor, and I'll try to be very careful and polite here, but I'll try to formulate my thoughts clearly. Not only security services, not only electoral committee need to keep up with times, but also the legal doctrine and judicial system need to be up to date. For example, commissions like Venice Commission need to be also fully aware, and courts need to be also very well aware, and we need to be well aware, that it's 2026. We're no longer living in the peaceful times of 1990. So the times have changed quite considerably. And we can learn a lot indeed from the experience of Moldova with the last year's parliamentary elections. Of course, there are no two elections alike. There are no two similar methods being used in different elections. But we will, of course, be exchanging the experience, which is absolutely crucial. And we'll also try to spread it across Europe through the legal doctrines in Europe. And this is where I should stop, and I hope I've been precise and polite, but actually this was not my idea entirely. I stole some of the ideas from Madam Sandu, in fact. So it's over to you, Madam President.
Thank you. In Moldova, Russia's interference has been brutal, and it was easier for the people to see it. In most of the democratic countries, EU countries, this interference is not going to be that brutal, it's not going to involve that many elements, and it might be more difficult for people to see it and to understand the danger. And especially this is true about the manipulation of information. Because in Moldova, we have seen inauthentic accounts, and we have seen how these inauthentic accounts were amplifying the disinformation. And then we have the algorithms which are being used in one way or another, and we believe that payment is part of the explanation. And the inauthentic accounts and the amplification of this information coming from the inauthentic accounts has nothing to do with the freedom of expression. And this is where we don't have the leverages, and this is where the rules are not yet there to protect the people. So in our case, we had a whole of society response. We had the state institutions, but also the independent media working on that, starting with like 12 months before the elections, to have the time to understand how these networks work, who's financing them, how they're all connected to one center, and then having time to show this to people. And it's important not just for the state institutions to show this, because, you know, sometimes citizens might believe that the state exaggerates. When you have the independent media also doing its work, the civil society, then it comes as a full picture, and then it's easier for people to understand what's what's truth and what is fabricated, financed, and spread disinformation to influence their decisions. So we have had this whole of government and whole of society response, but it is getting more and more complicated because the AI is being used more and more, and it's going to be more and more difficult for people to make the difference what's real and what's not real.
Paldies, ar šo arī preses konferenci.
Thank you. This concludes our press conference. Thank you all.